That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3. Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about the early history of cinema. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen to the lecture and answer questions 31 to 40.
In the first 2 decades of the 20th century, cinema established itself as a powerful mass medium. Movies were a popular entertainment for working people, but they were more than just entertainment. Movies were also regarded as high art by the intellectuals of the day. Many people believed that cinema or film would be the defining art form of the new century. Even in its earliest years, film was developing its own style, a style that was distinct from that of the theatre. But what do we mean when we speak of film style? To put it simply, style is the texture of a film's images and sounds. It's the filmmaker's systematic use of the techniques of the medium, for example, staging, lighting, performance, camera framing and focus. Editing and sound also contribute to style. A few filmmakers of the silent era were already developing film style. Most notably in the editing technique is cutting. Cutting is when the action is broken up into separate shots or pieces of film, and then the shots are recombined to tell the story in a coherent way. Before cutting, the action in films was like it was in the theatre. The action took place far away from us, and it was continuous. It wasn't interrupted by any closer views of the actors. Early film critics didn't like films that looked too much like theatre. Theatre was a well-recognized art form with its own traditions and methods. However, film was something new. And, well, it was an art form that owed its birth to the technology of the moving picture camera. Critics preferred to see stylistic editing, the technique that set film apart from theatre. A lot of critics felt that editing was the most important film technique. Cutting, the change from shot to shot, was regarded as the key to film artistry. Another film technique, called cross-cutting, made it possible to tell 2 stories at the same time. Cross-cutting is also called parallel action. It involves showing segments from 2 different sequences, moving back and forth from one to the other, so the 2 stories appear to be taking place at the same time. Cross-cutting was used in the film The Great Train Robbery, which was made in 1903. The film shows bandits escaping from the scene of their crime, and then it cross-cuts to a scene where the town people are dancing at a party, unaware the robbery has taken place. The audience easily understands that the two scenes are going on at the same time. The person who usually receives the credit for inventing most film techniques is D.W. Griffith. D.W. Griffith was an American filmmaker who is considered by many to be the most influential figure in the history of cinema. He began his career as a stage actor and writer in the first part of the 20th century. He took his stories to the early movie studios, landing at the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company in 1908. Until 1913, Griffith oversaw the production of almost all of Biograph's movies, more than 450 films. The quality of Griffith's productions was generally considered superior to his contemporaries, and his projects became more ambitious than the standard one-reel films. His 3-hour feature, The Birth of a Nation, is a stunning success, and is considered the most important film in the development of cinema as an art. While Griffith didn't invent everything about film, actually he defined and redefined the innovations of other filmmakers. He created movies that critics and audiences recognized as a unique narrative form. This is because he perfected the elements of film grammar and the art of the story film, which includes cross-cutting, close-ups, parallel narratives, camera movement, and more restrained acting. Instead of having one camera shoot a scene from one position, D.W. Griffith filmed each scene from many angles, and then he pieced together the sequences in the editing room. He used editing to heighten and control the dramatic impact of a scene. He introduced analytical editing, that is, breaking down a scene into shots that show closer views of people's faces or gestures. These closely framed shots are known as close-ups. The close-up conveys a character's emotions through subtle changes in the eyes, mouth, and brow. After D.W. Griffith, the close-up became a standard tool of the language of film.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.